How decadre. Alright. I want to do something. I don't need this stuff. I can just make it all. I'm just killing sprites. Just die, sprites. Die. Oh god, I am completely flipping out. Let's just get a bow. Let's just get a big old stack of arrows. Alright. That gives me something to do while I talk. It won't involve walking around. So, although it is kind of noisy, isn't it? I don't use bow and arrow much either. I'm not much of a sniper. I mean, the problem with bows is arrows are kind of hard to make. You need feathers, which pretty much come from chickens. Alright, let's continue our story. So my last comment to this guy was essentially, screw you. Oh, and our mutual friend, the one that connects us, you know, he said it was a trap, and then we were talking about compassion back and forth, and my friend said that I was one of the most compassionate people. Not that he knew, but he said I'm much more compassionate than most. And we met probably 15 years ago at this point, 14, something like that, through YouTube. Anyways, I don't want to get focused on him or you know, any personal information about him. I just relay all that to say that, you know, he was kind of, I think, trying to manage the situation between me and his other friend a little bit. And I finally said, screw it, F off, frack off, you know, word replacement. I'm not compassionate enough to deal with this crap first thing when I wake up. And I closed my tabs and walked down to the park and just sat on a little climbing tower they have at the playground by the elementary school. Not even for that long, but I went for a pretty long walk as well. When I got back, I checked my email and found that company that provides my internet had sent me an email that some of my mail had been returned to them as undeliverable. And I've lived in the same place for a long time, far longer than I should have. And so I'm like, how do I resolve this? And I've been intermittently missing mail for years. Not routinely. I always assumed it was theft or something, and that it, you know, again, intermittently, I would go months and seem to have all my mail, but just every once in a while, I would be expecting something and nothing would show up, and I incur late fees at times because of all this, and I'm not much of a calendar guy, so I rely on, you know, bills to pay things, like I get a statement and then I like deal with it. But so this made me mad because the Postal Service, it's one of those essential jobs that's been continuing even through this pandemic, and I appreciate the people who do that work. It's it's not well paid, or I guess it's fairly well respected because it is a kind of a direct point of contact. But I don't know my mailman, and he apparently doesn't know me or my mailbox or my house very well if he's marking things undeliverable and walking off when my car's parked in the back lot and I'm still here. My last name's on my mailbox twice, although it is kind of under a flap. I'm concerned about my personally identifiable information. So I get my N95 mask on and I go down to the post office, and they've got, stickers on the floor to show what 6 feet apart is, and there's a sign there that says people will not be allowed on the premises without face masks. Employees will refuse service to anyone not wearing a mask. Yeah, and I've started checking for those signs when I go into private businesses and looking to see if the people potentially preparing food for me are following the guidelines. And now that it's been so long, a lot of places are kind of relaxing their enforcement. But really, what upset me there was a man who is older than me, not wearing a mask, and he was there with what I assume was his son, who was wearing a mask and gloves, and they together were bringing in a whole series of packages that they wanted to mail. And so the guy with gloves and a mask and the guy without gloves or a mask are handling the same packages back and forth. And the guy without the mask sits down at one of the workstations where you pull out forms and stuff to fill out. And I'm just thinking, oh great, he's breathing on a public space that people sit down and use to try and mail things. One of the most fundamental, I don't want to get sidetracked by talking about the Postal Service, but United States Postal Service. But I was concerned about other people's health. And I'm not worried myself about getting infected. I'm sure I'd survive it. I'd probably have an uncomfortable couple weeks. I might not even have to go to the hospital. This is just based on the things I'm reading. I'm a pretty healthy guy. And I deal pretty well with infections and stuff, I think. I have had some, like with dental issues and whatever. So I have some experience. Anyways, and I'm pretty good with respiratory issues. And although this may be more of a blood thing, like a pulmonary thing, some of the new research is showing, but it certainly transmits through respiratory droplets, that if this guy was infected, he might not know for days, and he might just be breathing it out. And that's why we're all being asked to wear masks, even if we think we're healthy, when we're out in public. So I'm sitting there thinking about the fact that he's just breathing on the surfaces that any old lady could walk in and want to use. And while a lot of people are wearing masks, not a lot of people are wearing gloves. I think that was an extra burden that they thought was going too far or whatever. And people are all over the spectrum. I accept that some people don't think the virus even exists, and that some people are just horribly afraid that if they step outside their front door, they're going to die. And those are both extremes that are ridiculous to me. But I also accept that we're each in charge of our own head. But at the same time, the country's a cult of individuality worship, and that relates to some of our problems. That when we assume that other people aren't taking responsibility for their own life, we get very judgmental. I mean, think about homeless people, drug users, even just like people who can't manage their own budget or whatever, which is very common, but then we judge them, and we don't look at the hardships they face and the losses they may have incurred. We just look at their lifestyle and their parents and where they live, whatever. Do they have a car or not? Do they own property or do they rent? There are all these layered things that have often coincided with race, and there are feedback loops. It is harder for minorities to get apartments or whatever, because it's so easy to just deny somebody without stating a reason, and it's illegal to do it based on race. But if that's just in the landlord's head or the realtor's head or whatever, it goes nowhere else. There's no way to get the intent out of somebody's head unless they're careless and say something out loud or document something or whatever. It's hard to prove. So, and then don't even get me started on trying to get home loans. Anyway, there's a lot of struggles that minorities face that the majority just doesn't even think about. So out of concern about what I was seeing in front of me and transmission of the virus and all that stuff, I said something to the man. You're not going to wear a mask in here? And he just kind of ignored me. And then his son was trying to get service from the counter. A postal worker was trying to help him. But every question the postal worker had, the son would turn to the father, and then the father would answer. And then when he needed payment, the son stepped over to the island counter that was kind of between them, and the father handed over his credit card. So it just seemed like a really weird tableau to me, that you have signs posted that they're going to enforce masks, that anyone in the building should have a mask, and that they would refuse service if you didn't have a mask. But this guy was just on camera in full daylight, ignoring the sign, and the postal worker was ignoring their own policies, not enforcing it. And he was just, he had this end run. Wow, I don't usually use sport metaphors. He just was using this obvious loophole. Well, if my son steps up to the counter and I stay back 2 feet, but he's still there, breathe anyway. So I said a few more things calmly, and now directed at the postal worker. And this older gentleman gave me the bird, low enough that the postal worker wouldn't see it. And that annoyed me a little bit, and I I said a few more things that I was just concerned about public health, and that at one point I stepped over to reread the sign that was posted right on the island counter that he was leaning over. And I said it's something else, and he flipped me off again. And I said, well, there were 3 middle fingers. The first was below the counter, and I think I said, sure, flip me off, that really helps. The second one, I think I said, I'm sorry that you feel like you're the victim. Because I knew we were playing this power game that he was trying to communicate with me without the postal worker seeing, because he knew he was the bigger authority and should be enforcing it. We all knew who should be enforcing the policy. These two guys, the employee and the customer that was being serviced through his son, or receiving service via his son, who was also there. And I wasn't even concerned about myself. I was concerned about the next person to walk in who might not have a mask, or who might just touch the surfaces, walk out to their car, take their mask off, and then rub their eyes or something. If you're only following the guidelines that the governor issued without understanding what's going on, you're at greater risk. And I was just worried about, I'm really worried about people with immune system issues. I don't want to kill that sheep. I'm almost angry enough to just kill random sheep, I have God powers here right now, so it's pretty easy to just, let's sheep it up. There you go. I have created life. Sheep trees. And if all life is equal, then it really doesn't matter if I kill a sheep, because I just made 8. I'm sorry, guys. You're not all... I respect your individuality and your diversity, even though you all look like the same color. But heck, we can even fix that. Alright, guys. Pink and purple sheep tree. Purple sheep tree. Alright, so... And, maybe I was the bad guy in the situation. Because I was taking responsibility onto myself to protect people I don't even know. To protect a potential person. But the postal worker and the guy without a mask were choosing to ignore the guidelines. And so as he was leaving, he gave me a third middle finger. And I got mad enough, I stood up and kind of threw my arms out and up, like just a kind of a instinctive gesture of size, and took a couple steps forward. And I said, yeah, keep flipping me off, it's really helping the situation. And he didn't even look at me. This guy was bigger than me too, stronger than me. He could have taken me even without his son there. I don't normally posture like this. I am not combative. And for a long time in my life, I kept my head down and my mouth shut, especially when it came to just how I felt or my perspective. And maybe YouTube has changed me in part. Maybe, my personal interactions with some people in my life have been a big influence. I'm thinking of a former employer here right now. Oh, I threw my bow away. Crossbow. But I was pretty annoyed by the whole thing. And I was there for a while waiting for... I don't know how crossbows work. It's kind of a double click. I was there to try and deal with this issue of my mail not showing up, and this same postal worker had already told me that, oh well, your mail wouldn't be here, it would be with the postal carrier, but your regular carrier isn't working today. I'll need to talk to him Monday. I kind of pushed the issue, and he said, well, I'll check in the back, and then he came back and said, I don't see anything here for you. And then I'm like, are you saying my mail that was returned as undeliverable would be on my carrier? And it didn't make sense because my internet company had received it returned to them as undeliverable. Or no, maybe they just got notice. It could have been electronic notice from USPS that something had bounced, so maybe it could have been on the carrier, but it didn't make sense. And I had missed 2 months in a row from this same company. Plus now I've learned that there's my utility company, there's one I missed, and I'm getting late fees for these, and I can't afford it right now. And all this stuff just piles up, and I know it's happening in different ways all across the country because there's so many people who have lost their jobs or had their hours cut back, or or have been deemed non-essential workers and had to shelter in place. And I've been walking the line between. In both of my jobs I'm considered an essential worker, but in both cases my employers were trying to follow the guidelines and do the right thing and cut back. But I do scene investigations where I have to go out to a specific place to see what happened there and to document it. So the bow's just quicker. So yeah, that whole thing left a bad taste in my mouth because I felt trapped there while I was waiting for a manager, and then I'm watching this guy just ignore the governor, ignore the posted signs, and then the employee ignore the policies. But he left, and by the time I got out to my car, none of my tires were... the guy didn't know what my car looked like, but... yeah. So I guess now we get to the protest. Insert catchphrase here.